At our 25th anniversary dinner, my wife Isabella tapped her wine glass and told the entire restaurant she wanted a divorce. Right there at Romano's Steakhouse, in front of 40 strangers, said she'd found someone who actually understood her. "I'm Mason Reynolds. I'm 60 years old. And you know what?" I smiled when she said it. Then I told her about one little detail she didn't know about. Look, I should have seen this coming when Isabella insisted we go to Romano's for our anniversary. In 25 years of marriage, we'd never celebrated there. "Too fancy," she always said. "Too expensive for what you get." But there we were, sitting at this white tablecloth table she'd specifically requested right smack in the center of the dining room. Isabella looked great. I'll give her that. Blue dress, new haircut that made her look younger than 56. But something felt off from the moment we sat down. She kept checking her phone, glancing toward the entrance like she was waiting for someone to show up. "You expecting company?" I asked, cutting into my steak. She looked up quick, almost startled. "What?" "No, of course not. This is our night." "Yeah, right. Our night." Except it felt more like a performance than a celebration. Here's the thing, though. Back in May, about 8 months before this whole restaurant disaster, I got some news that changed everything. My Uncle Oliver out in Nevada died of a heart attack. Guy was 73, never married, no kids. Turns out he'd been following my engineering career from a distance and decided to leave me everything when he passed. Everything turned out to be $750,000 in assets, plus 2 industrial rental properties and an equipment business that brought in $200 every month. Just like that, I went from comfortable middle class to genuinely wealthy. Uncle Oliver's lawyer said the old man wanted me to keep it quiet until I figured out what to do with it. Smart guy, Uncle Oliver. So anyway, I'm sitting on this inheritance, not telling Isabella because something told me to wait. Good thing I listened to that instinct. About 3 months after I got the inheritance news, I started noticing Isabella acting different. It was around March when she began working late a few nights a week. When I offered to bring her dinner at the office, she'd get all snippy about it. "I can take care of myself, Mason. I'm not some helpless child." Okay, fair enough. But then the phone calls started. At first, maybe 1 or 2 a week that she'd take out in the garage or upstairs in the bedroom. When I asked about them, she had ready answers. Work emergency. You know how crazy things get with the new HR system. Except Isabella managed human resources for a mid-size company. Emergency calls at 9 p.m. on Tuesday nights? Come on. By June, these calls were happening every day. Isabella would excuse herself from dinner, from watching TV, from just normal conversations to answer her phone. And here's what got me. Her voice would change completely when she picked up. Softer, more animated. Sometimes I could hear her laughing from whatever room she'd disappeared into. One evening, I was out back checking the sprinkler system when I heard her through the kitchen window. She was making dinner plans with someone, talking about meeting at our usual spot next Tuesday. When she came outside, I asked casual-like, "Work dinner tomorrow?" She looked confused for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, with the regional director. That efficiency review project, you remember?" I remembered that efficiency review. It had been wrapped up 2 months earlier. That's when I started paying real attention. And once you start looking, you see everything. Isabella began caring a lot more about how she looked. New clothes, expensive perfume, a gym membership she'd never used before. She said she wanted to feel better about herself as she got closer to 60. "You look great," I told her one morning, as she put on some new necklace I'd never seen before. "Thanks," she said, but it was like thanking a stranger who complimented your shirt in an elevator. Our bedroom situation pretty much disappeared. Isabella started staying up later, claiming she couldn't sleep. She'd come to bed after I was out and wake up before me, showering and getting dressed in the bathroom so she wouldn't wake me up. But I wasn't sleeping either. I was lying there listening to the water run, wondering when my wife turned into someone I didn't recognize. Now here's where having that inheritance money came in handy. Instead of just wondering and worrying like some poor guy with no options, I could actually do something about it. So in July, I hired a private investigator. Cost me $2,500, but it was worth every penny. Within 2 weeks, I had photos of Isabella entering an apartment complex every Tuesday and Thursday around 6 p.m. The apartment belonged to Logan Bennett. Logan Bennett, my best friend for 30 years, the guy who was best man at our wedding, the guy who'd held my son Aiden when he was born, and helped me build the deck on our house. Logan, who was going through his own messy divorce, and had been crying on my shoulder for months about how his wife didn't understand him. Logan, who'd been coming to our house for dinner every few weeks, sitting at my table, eating my food, and listening sympathetically when I mentioned that Isabella and I weren't connecting like we used to. The betrayal was complete. My wife and my best friend, planning their future while playing concerned friends to my face. But here's what really got me steamed. While I'm dealing with this betrayal, I start digging deeper into our finances. You know what I found? Isabella had been moving money around for months. Our joint business account that I used for equipment purchases, she'd transferred $25,000 to help Logan start his own engineering firm. 25 grand of our money to set up my competition. The guy was stealing my clients, using my wife, and doing it all with my own cash. That takes some serious nerve. So, I kept digging. Found receipts for dinners at Giovanni's, $127 for 2 people on nights Isabella claimed she was working late. Hotel charges on our joint credit card for places I'd never been. Even found a bill from some fancy florist for weekly flower deliveries to Logan's apartment. Weekly flowers. While I'm home eating leftover pizza for dinner because my wife's too tired to cook. My private investigator, this sharp guy named Rodriguez, kept bringing me more evidence. Photos, credit card records, phone logs. Turns out Isabella and Logan had been planning this whole thing for over a year. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a business strategy around it. Your friend's been using information from your wife's HR position to poach your clients, Rodriguez told me during one of our meetings. She's been feeding him details about contract renewals, budget discussions, personnel changes. Classic insider trading, except it's your marriage instead of the stock market. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some passionate love affair that got out of hand. This was a calculated business move disguised as romance. Logan needed capital and client information to compete with me. Isabella wanted out of our marriage but was scared about the financial hit, so they figured out how to solve both problems at once. Pretty smart, actually. Except they made one major miscalculation. They assumed I'd never find out, and even if I did, that I'd be too devastated or too broke to fight back effectively. Wrong on both counts. See, while they were planning their exit strategy, I was building something bigger. That inheritance from Uncle Oliver, I wasn't just sitting on it. I'd been meeting with business advisors, investment managers, property developers. By August, I had a clear plan to expand my engineering firm into 3 states. The Nevada properties. Uncle Oliver left me were perfect for a West Coast operation. I was about to become a genuinely wealthy man. And Isabella and Logan had no clue. Which brings us back to that anniversary dinner at Romano's. By the time we sat down that night, I had everything I needed. Bank records, photos, phone logs, business documents, enough evidence to bury them both in divorce court and civil litigation. But I wanted to see how they'd handle it. Would Isabella come clean? Would she at least have the decency to end our marriage privately instead of making it into some kind of public spectacle? Nope. She chose the nuclear option. When Isabella stood up with that wine glass, I knew exactly what was coming. She'd rehearsed this moment, probably with Logan coaching her through it. Make it public. Make it dramatic. Make Mason look like the pathetic husband being discarded for someone better. "I'd like to make an announcement," she said, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. The place went quiet, real fast. People could sense something big was about to happen. To my husband, Mason. We've been married for 25 wonderful years. She put so much sarcasm into the word wonderful that even the waitstaff stopped moving. But tonight, I want a divorce. I found someone who truly understands me, someone who appreciates me for who I am. Dead silence. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Every person in that restaurant was staring at our table, watching this woman destroy her marriage in front of a room full of strangers. That's when I realized something important. Isabella wasn't just leaving me. She was humiliating me. This whole public performance was designed to make me look small, defeated, abandoned. She wanted witnesses to see Mason Reynolds getting dumped for a better man. But you know what? Sitting there listening to my wife of 25 years announce our divorce to a room full of strangers, I felt something I didn't expect. Relief. Pure, clean relief. Not devastation, not anger, not even embarrassment. Just this calm certainty that I was finally free to stop pretending everything was fine. So I stood up too, reached for my wine glass and looked Isabella right in the eye. "Perfect timing," I said, my voice carrying just as clearly as hers had. "I've been waiting for you to be honest." I pulled off my wedding ring, the gold band she'd put there 25 years ago with tears streaming down her face, and dropped it into my wine glass. Made this satisfying little clink when it hit the bottom. "I'll be throwing a freedom celebration next week," I announced to the room. "Consider yourselves invited to celebrate my liberation from a marriage that's been a lie for longer than I cared to admit." Isabella's confident smirk disappeared real fast. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected. She probably figured I'd break down, beg her to reconsider, maybe cause a scene that would make her look like the victim. Instead, I was taking control of the narrative. "You're making a scene, Mason," she hissed. I smiled for the first time in months. "No, Isabella, you made the scene. I'm just finishing it." I left some cash on the table, more than enough to cover our meal, and a decent tip, and walked out of Romano's feeling like a new man. But before I left Isabella sitting there with her mouth hanging open, I leaned down close to her ear. "You have no idea what you just set in motion," I whispered. "And when you find out, you're going to wish you'd handled this privately." She called after me as I headed for the door. "What's that supposed to mean, Mason?" I didn't turn around. Let her wonder. The next morning, I called Mitchell Anderson, the divorce attorney I'd already researched months earlier. Sharp guy, specializes in high-asset divorces where one spouse has been playing games with the finances. "I need to file immediately," I told him during our first meeting, "and I need to make sure my wife understands exactly what she's lost." Anderson reviewed all my evidence, and man, did I have evidence. Bank records showing the $25,000 transfer to Logan's business account. Credit card, statements with hotel charges and restaurant bills for 2 people on nights Isabella claimed to be working. The private investigator's photos of Isabella entering Logan's apartment building twice a week for 8 months. "This is excellent documentation," Anderson said, flipping through the files. "Your wife used marital assets to fund her paramour's competing business. That's grounds for reimbursement plus punitive damages. But here's the beautiful part. While Anderson was preparing the legal strategy, I decided to have a little man-to-man conversation with Logan. I showed up at his new office on Thursday afternoon. Small place in a strip mall. Nothing like the established firm I'd built over 15 years. Logan looked shocked when I walked through his door. "Mason. Hey, buddy. What brings you by?" Buddy. This guy's sleeping with my wife, stealing my clients, and he calls me buddy. "Heard you started your own firm," I said, looking around at his cheap furniture and single-employee operation. "Funny. Thing is, I never heard you mention it during all those dinners at my house." Logan's face went red. Look, Mason, I wanted to tell you, but what? You were too busy screwing my wife to find time for conversation? Dead silence. Logan sat down hard in his chair. How long, Logan? Mason, listen. How long have you been planning to destroy my marriage and steal my business? He rubbed his face with both hands. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Isabella and I, we just connected, you know. And the business thing, that was separate. Separate? You used my money to start it. $25,000 from our joint account. Money I earned while you were crying on my shoulder about your own divorce. Logan looked like he wanted to crawl under his desk. I can pay you back. Oh, you're going to pay me back, with interest. And when you can't, I'm going to own this little operation of yours. Here's what Logan didn't know. While he was setting up his rinky-dink competing firm, I was using Uncle Oliver's inheritance to expand into 3 states. By the time I walked out of his office, I'd already signed contracts worth $400,000 in new business. Logan was trying to compete with a bicycle while I was driving a freight train. The divorce proceedings moved fast. Isabella got served 48 hours after her restaurant performance. She must have expected me to fall apart for a few weeks, maybe try to work things out. Instead, she was facing a legal team that had her dead to rights on adultery and financial misconduct. Our first settlement meeting was something to see. Isabella brought Logan for moral support. The guy who'd betrayed 30 years of friendship sat across from me like nothing had happened. Let's be reasonable about this, Mason, Isabella started. We can divide everything fairly without expensive lawyers getting involved. Anderson opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Mrs. Reynolds spent approximately $18,000 of marital funds on her extramarital affair. Over 18 months, he announced. She also facilitated the unauthorized transfer of $25,000 to fund her paramour's competing business. We're seeking full reimbursement plus damages. Isabella went white as a sheet. Logan looked like he might throw up. Furthermore, Anderson continued, we're requesting spousal support of $2,200 per month for 3 years, given that Mr. Reynolds supported his wife's career advancement throughout their marriage. $2,200 a month? Isabella's voice cracked. I only make $58,000 a year. Perhaps Mrs. Reynolds should have considered the financial implications before committing adultery and theft. Anderson replied coldly. That meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end, Isabella looked like she'd aged 10 years. Logan kept staring at the table, probably calculating how much this was all going to cost him. This isn't what I wanted, Isabella said as we packed up our papers. I never meant for it to get this ugly. What did you want? I asked her. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to feel alive again. And you couldn't talk to your husband about that? You had to humiliate me in front of 40 strangers instead? She looked down. I thought you'd try to stop me. Maybe I would have. Or maybe we could have figured out how to end this marriage like adults. But we'll never know now, will we? Logan's business lasted about 6 months before it went under. Turns out, success in engineering requires more than stolen client lists and borrowed money. It requires reputation, experience, and the ability to deliver quality work on time and on budget. Logan had none of those things. The clients he'd stolen from me? Half of them came back within 90 days, apologizing for the disruption and asking if I'd take them back. Professional word travels fast in our industry. Everyone knew Logan had burned his bridges. The divorce was finalized 8 weeks later. Isabella agreed to every single term, rather than face a public trial where all the evidence would come out. She got to keep her car and her 401k. I got the house, 80% of our joint assets, and $2,200 a month in spousal support for 3 years. But here's something Isabella never found out. I didn't need her money. Every month when that support payment showed up in my account, I donated the whole thing to the local men's crisis center. The money she was struggling to send me went to help guys who were genuinely down and out. Men whose lives were being rebuilt with her forced generosity. Perfect irony, if you ask me. Meanwhile, my business was exploding. Using Uncle Oliver's inheritance as seed capital, I'd expanded Reynolds Engineering into Nevada and Arizona. Those industrial properties he left me were gold mines, perfect locations for equipment storage and regional offices. Within a year of the divorce, my income jumped from $95,000 to $180,000 annually. Logan's competing firm? Dead and buried by month 8. Turns out you can't run a successful engineering operation on stolen client lists and borrowed money. You need reputation, experience, and the ability to deliver quality work on time. Logan had burned all his bridges and couldn't deliver on any of his promises. The clients he'd poached from me came crawling back with their tails between their legs. "We made a mistake," they'd say. Logan promised us 20% savings and better turnaround times. Instead, he delivered shoddy work, missed deadlines, and charged hidden fees they didn't see coming. By the end, Logan owed money to suppliers, clients were threatening lawsuits, and he was personally liable for about $60,000 in business debts. Last I heard, he was doing freelance electrical work and living in a studio apartment across town. Isabella? Well, let's just say dating a married man who buys you flowers and takes you to nice dinners is very different from living with a divorced man who can barely pay rent. About 18 months after the divorce, I was at the hardware store picking up supplies for a project when I spotted Isabella in the checkout line. She looked tired, older. Her clothes were nice enough, but not the designer stuff she used to wear when she was spending my money. "Mason," she said when she saw me. Sounded surprised, maybe nervous. "Isabella, how are you doing?" "Good. Really good. Logan and we're working things out." Working things out. That's one way to describe living paycheck to paycheck with a guy whose business failed spectacularly. "Glad to hear it," I said. And I meant it. Not because I wished her well exactly, but because her happiness or misery wasn't my problem anymore. "You look really successful," she said, noticing my new truck in the parking lot. "Business must be going well, can't complain. Expanded into 3 states, bought some property. Life's good." She nodded, but I could see her doing the math, figuring out what she'd walked away from, what she'd traded for Logan Bennett and his failed dreams. "Mason," she said as I headed for the door, "I want you to know I'm sorry about how everything went down. The toy, restaurant thing, all of it." I stopped and looked at her. This woman who'd shared 25 years of my life, who'd thrown it all away for a fantasy that lasted less than 2 years. "You know what, Isabella? You're apologizing to the wrong person." "What do you mean? You should apologize to yourself. You're the one who lost the most in all this." I left her standing there, probably wondering what I meant. But it was true. She hadn't just lost a husband when she chose Logan. She'd lost a partner who would have worked with her through anything if she'd been honest. She'd lost financial security, social standing, and 25 years of shared history for a relationship built on lies and stolen money. Logan would probably leave her eventually. Men who betray their best friends don't suddenly develop loyalty when things get tough. And when that happened, Isabella would be alone with the knowledge that she'd destroyed something real for something that was never going to last. But you know what? That's her problem now, not mine. These days, I wake up every morning in a house that's completely mine. I watch what I want on TV, eat what I want for dinner, make plans without checking with anyone. I bought that mountain cabin in Colorado I'd always talked about. Isabella used to say it was impractical and too far from civilization. I also started seeing Charlotte Martinez, an architect I met through a business conference. She's 53, divorced herself, financially independent, and interested in me for who I am, not what I can provide. We've been together 8 months now, and it's the most honest relationship I've ever had. No games, no hidden agendas, no one trying to change the other person into something they're not. Sometimes people ask me if I'm bitter about what Isabella and Logan did. Here's the truth. I'm grateful, That public humiliation at Romano's was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to discover who I really was when everything got stripped away. 25 years of marriage ended with betrayal and lies. But something much better started the moment I chose dignity over devastation. When you realize your true value, you understand that people who couldn't see it were never worthy of you in the first place. The greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so much better that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. Because at the end of the day, the people who truly matter will recognize your worth without you having to prove it, and those who don't simply aren't your people. That's the difference between surviving betrayal and thriving beyond it.